Hello everyone, it's Jennifer Hoagland here again with Gooseberry Gardens, and today we're going to talk about supporting our plants. Alright, so we're going to start off with tomato plants. And tomatoes are divided into two major groups. There's indeterminate, which are the vining tomatoes, and there's determinate, which are the bush tomatoes. Okay, and they both require different kinds of support. So we're going to start with vine tomatoes. Vine tomatoes can get really, really tall, so we need to make sure we support them for their full height. Okay, so what I like to do is something called string training. So I have a very large support, we'll look at this in a second. And I use a string for each plant. So I start with, these are anchoring pins. They look just like this. Okay, you can get these, they're actually used for holding down landscape fabric, which I do not use them for. I use them for tomato structures. Okay, and I just use cotton thread or cotton twine. That's what this is. I use cotton because it's fully biodegradable, and at the end of the season I can throw this directly into my compost bin. Okay, tie one end of the string to the bottom of the anchoring pin and put it into the ground. Okay, so here you can see I've stuck the anchoring pin in the ground here with the string tied on to the bottom. And then we're going to run that string up to our topmost horizontal post and tie it off nice and taut. All right, so I forgot to mention we do this after we plant our tomato, by the way. Tomatoes planted first, and then we do our string training. So we put in our anchor on the bottom, our string is pulled taut and attached to the very top brace, which we'll look at in a second. Okay, and then we're going to very gently wrap our tomato plant around the string. All right, so you have to do this very carefully. All you do is twist your tomato plant around. Try to get it twisted so that there is a twist between each branch on your tomato plant. Okay, as your tomato grows throughout the season, all you're going to do is gently twist it, the new growth, around our string, like so. Okay, careful, tomato branches are very, very delicate. Okay, then as it grows throughout the season, we're going to do some pruning. This is for vining tomato indeterminate plants only, okay? So we are going to remove any suckers, okay? Suckers are little branches that are forming in between our main stem and any vertical branches. So if we take a look down here, there is a horizontal branch coming off our main vertical branch, and there's one little shoot growing right into the crotch here. That is a sucker on our vining tomato plants, and we're just going to prune those out as our plant grows. Okay, another little one down here, another little one coming down here. Not really, and that's about it for this guy. So as the plant grows throughout the season, all we're going to do is continue vining and twirling our plant up the string so it's got good support. Okay, and removing those suckers as we go. All right, so now we're going to talk about bush or determinate tomatoes. These reach a set height. Okay, I grow both of these in my garden because I use them for different things. Vining tomato plants tend to have fruit that ripen all at different times throughout the season. Bush tomatoes tend to have all their fruit ripen at one time. So if you are someone that likes to make tomato sauce or canned tomatoes, that can be a really good thing. Everything's ready at once, you can process the whole thing. Bush tomatoes also grow differently, and so we have different ways to keep them supported. So this is a tomato cage. It's pretty standard. You can get them at most big box stores or any garden center. They come in this medium size, and they also come in a little bit of larger size. Okay, try to get as sturdy as you can. You're going to be using these for a few years, and there's some really flimsy ones out there. Try to go for good sturdy tomato cages if you can find them. All we do is right after planting, we very gently put the tomato cage over our tomato. It's got pointy ends on the bottom so it can adhere into the ground really nicely. And then gently bring up our tomato branches and make sure they lay over top of the horizontal round supports here. Okay, we don't really do any pruning with our bush Determinate variety tomatoes. If they do happen to get really thick late in the season, I may do a little pruning of branches that don't have tomatoes on them, just to make sure that the tomatoes that are on this plant get a little bit more sun and can ripen more quickly. But we don't really have to do pruning on these if we don't want to. Okay, so that's it for tomatoes. We're going to move on and look at some different vining crops. Okay, moving on. So this is a trellis that I purchased from a garden supply store. I believe it was Bessie's online. All it is a trellis on one side with two support stakes that we stick in, one on either side here. I use this for things like beans or cucumbers in this instance. All I do is plant the cucumbers underneath. As they grow, I train them up the trellis. The really fabulous thing about a structure like this is that it creates a bunch of shade on the underside here. So this is a great place for planting things that are prone to bolting, like lettuces and spinach, midsummer and on into fall. The cucumbers, as they grow up the trellis, give them a little bit of shade, and then they're not so prone to bolting. Okay, so I promised I'd show you the whole support system that I use in my vegetable garden. This is metal conduit for electrical work. I just got it at a big box store, really cheap, really stable. You could also use like plastic PVC conduit. I just found that the metal was stronger, especially when we're going to this height. So I'm about 5 feet. We're about 8 feet tall here. That's a good height for our vining indeterminate tomatoes. Okay, little connectors that you can get specifically for this metal conduit. Okay, and a T in the center of this long span, because it's about a 12-foot span, just to give it some support in the middle as well. All right, and I have these in a system where the whole thing can be lifted up and moved from bed to bed. So I rotate my crops in my vegetable garden, and so tomatoes are not in the same spot every year. Cucumbers, beans, not in the same spot every year. So I developed a system where I could lift off these structures and move them to different beds every year. Okay, and we're going to go over here and I'm going to show you what that system looks like. So on either side of the bed, all I have is a piece of rebar. This is a 3 or 4 foot length of rebar, okay, that I pounded into the ground. Then I've used just a metal bracket and I put it on quite loose, okay, to hold that rebar in place. And then when I go to move my conduit structure, all I do is lift it up and that conduit fits perfectly over top of this rebar. Okay, and then we just tighten in this bracket a little bit to keep it nice and steady. Really easy to lift off and move from year to year. Okay, I also have a shorter version. Okay, so a tall one for tomatoes. And then I also have a shorter version here. This is what I use for my vining or indeterminate beans. Okay, a little bit shorter. I don't have it up yet because my beans haven't really started some good growth yet, but once they get growing, I'll put up some mesh netting, okay, easily available once again from any garden store, and I will tie it to the sides and the top of this shorter structure, and that'll be perfect for my beans. Okay, and I usually buy new mesh every year. The beans get really intertwined. Okay, that's a little bit wasteful. I'm working on a better solution for that, but that's what I use for right now. Okay, so this is a kettle panel. It is steel mesh. It's really rigid. They usually come in sheets of 4 feet by 8 feet long. You can get these at your local UFA. You can also get them a lot of times at big box stores like Home Depot. I use these when I'm going against a fence. So here we have pea plants. They just started coming up. And then I'm going to train them to grow up here. I've attached this panel to the fence I'm using extra large staples. They're about 1 inch long. You can buy them once again at a big box hardware store, and just pounded them in with a hammer to support this cattle panel against the fence here. Okay, now I like to use this instead of the plastic mesh that I talked about before with the beans, just because this is a lot sturdier. So I can use this year after year. At the end of the year when the peas are done, it's really easy to pull them off of this without damaging the mesh at all because it's very rigid. Okay, so this is a new pergola that we put in about 2 years ago. Waited for the ground around it to settle, and I finally put in a new bed in front here around the posts of the pergola this year. Okay, so because this is a really, really sunny, hot spot in my yard, the reason we put a pergola up here, grapes was what we decided to try growing. So grapes, as everyone knows, needs a really good structure. Just a quick note, grapes do have really, really strong root systems. Don't be planting these right beside your house foundation. They have an affinity for concrete and can mess up your foundation walls. So grapes are one of the few things that you shouldn't plant right beside your house foundation, as an aside. Okay, but we're not right close to the foundation. We're a little bit further out here. Perfect place for grapes. So the structure we decided to try out for grapes are just a wire trellis. So I've used these little eye bolts. Okay, they can screw right into the posts that we have here. These are little tiny ones, and I put them about every foot, all the way up to the top. Okay, and I've just tied a wire. This is wire that you can use for picture frames. I also looked at insulated wire that has a plastic coating, like for electrical work. It was really expensive for the amount that I needed. So we decided to try this wire for now, and then if this doesn't seem to work really well, we'll switch it up and I'll keep you updated on it. But this is what we're going with for now. And I've just tied the wire through and up crosswise. So 2 different lengths of wire all the way up in an X pattern, all the way up the post that we have here. Okay, and then we will train our grapes. And they have little adapted leaves that will spire around our wire here. And hopefully this will be a really good spot for them to grow. We already have a little bit of baby grapes coming, so pretty excited about grapes this year. This is Valiant grape, by the way. One of the hardiest ones for here in Calgary and area. All right, last one. So this is another post. This is on an arbor that we got done at the same time as our pergola. And this is a little bit shadier area. So here we decided to plant some kiwi. So for here in the Calgary area, obviously the kiwi that we buy at the store from New Zealand is not going to cut it. And there's also a hardy kiwi and an Arctic kiwi. So hardy kiwi is not quite hardy enough for us here, but Arctic kiwi is. All right, you need both a male and a female for kiwi vine to produce fruit. There are a couple self-fertile ones out there. And you can also buy kiwi vines that have a male and a female grafted onto one rootstock. Okay, so just make sure that you have a male and a female or a self-fertile in some form if you want to have kiwi fruit. Okay, here we did something similar to what we did with the grapes. So we used our little eye bolts that we screwed in here. The only difference with this one is that I put the eye bolts all the way around the post, and then I wrapped our wire so that it went all the way around and in both directions. Okay, kiwi vine is a lot wider plant, and it gets a lot more shoots off of it, so it's a lot bushier and a lot wider than our grapevines. So I wanted to be able to train this all the way around our post here. So that's why I wanted to make sure we had wire on all 4 sides of the post for it to climb. All right. And it looks like we have a flower coming here. Yay! Just planted this like a week and a half ago. So it's still really tiny, still getting used to where it is. I'll give it some good mulch, and hopefully we'll get some kiwis this year. And they actually are fantastically sweet here. I forgot to mention that Arctic kiwis are a little bit smaller. They end up being like 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall. They're not fuzzy and they're not brown, they're green. Okay, and smooth, And they're actually a little bit sweeter than the kiwis that you're used to in the grocery store. So, hoping for kiwis this year. I'll keep you updated. That's about it for supporting and support structures for our garden plants. Next time I think we're going to talk about covering. All the covers that we can put over, especially our vegetable gardens throughout the year. Okay? Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to like and comment it below if you have any questions or comments that you'd like answered. And we will see you next time. Yummy gardening, everyone.